There we go.
There we go. Hello, hello, beautiful people. We meet again.
Great to see you, man.
Thursday. Yeah, it's office hours. We have 76 people so far. There I see Frank without fail every single time. That is also here. Hello, guys. How are you doing today?
Dude, doing well. How are you?
So, what's up?
Hi. Mohan, what's up, dude?
Gentlemen, you know the drill. Drop on the comments where you are from, the temperature at the city you're in currently, and the additional follow-up question. Let us know if you're an agency, if you're a freelancer, or a SaaS company. We'd love to know. Come on, let's hit the comment section. Berlin, beautiful. Karen from San Francisco. 569 degrees Celsius. Mohan is here. Hello, sir. We had Mohan last week. Beautiful session.
Clay agency.
Island, 14 degrees. Dallas, as always. Good to know, Ashish. Keep it coming. France, Costa Rica, 27. Hi, Susan. Thank you for joining. Perfect. Keep it coming through. But without further ado, Kellen, if it's okay, let's kickstart, right? So this session is going to be a very interesting one. We have Kellen Casebeer, who is the founder of Deal Labs. And Deal Labs is actually a market fit messaging focused outbound agency. And they actually help you run outbound emails. They do it for you. And even if you want them to actually train and set up things for your team, they do that as well. But Kellen, over to you, sir. A quick round of introduction about yourself and about the company. We'd love to know.
Yeah. How's it going, everyone? My name is Kellen Casebeer. So I run the Deal Lab. We are a Smartlead partner. We're a Clay certified expert partner as well. We basically do like cold email systems, bespoke data sets, and then sort of like custom GTM engineering stuff. Yeah, so we've been doing this like 2 years and like 2 days now. So super excited to be here, man.
Absolutely. And today we're going to get the sauce out of you, right? So the main point of conversation is going to be building high performance cold email outbound systems that can actually scale without breaking. And I actually had 4 portions of it. People, as you know, we'll also have an AMA at the end of the session. You can also drop your questions on chat. We'll pick up right there. And happy anniversary, Kellen. So it's I think it's kind of 2 years at this point, right? So congratulations for that. And kickstarting this, the first thing I wanted to cover was this topic called the outbound trap, right? Because as much as I speak to people, a lot of teams utilize only inbound. They lose hope in outbound because they feel outbound fails all the time. Based on your experience, you've been doing this for a lot of people. You've been doing this for yourself. Why do you think most outbound fails, Kelly?
Yeah, so I think to me, what a lot of times people do, right, is like when you go learn an avatar that you're going to sell to, right? It's like, okay, who's the person? What's the company type, right? It's like a software company.
Right.
What's the persona? It's like a VP of marketing, right? And then you're like, all right, what's the VP marketing care about? And it's like MQLs and I mean, really, it's just that, right? It's like lead generation. It's like, all right, cool. And then you're like, all right, what's our product, right? So you learn this person, you learn the market, you learn the person, you learn your product. What do we do? It's like, oh, we send emails, right? Why do we do this? To help marketers set more MQLs. And you're like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. And then you take some inbound calls, right? And you're like, why are you here? And they're like, we want to set more, we want MQLs. And we think that you can help us send these emails. And you kind of get in this trap of seeing this pattern of like, this person cares about this thing in this way, right? When they're either inbound or sort of like on paper. But then when you go outbound, you kind of find out that like face value like that doesn't actually cut it usually. You know what I mean? And so I think these people, people don't realize in outbound, you're trying to hit people sort of like earlier in their journey, right? And so it's sort of like their state of thinking is quite different where they currently are. And the message that you have to feed them to get them interested in sort of exploring new things is completely different than why they'll say yes to you further down the line.
Got it. Got it. Makes a lot of sense. And why do you think pipelines are inconsistent at this point, right? Because that's one more pain point that they have. The systems, the pipeline that they have, everything is kind of inconsistent when it comes to outbound. So do you have any pointers for that?
Yeah, so to kind of go back a little bit to that last concept, right? The way I think of it is like product market fit being if someone knows what you do, they know they have a problem, they know your price point, will they say
Right.
yes? And will they
Mhm.
retain with you? Someone corrected me on that recently, which I loved. So it's like we retain them, right? That's product market fit, right? Message market fit to me is sort of like, can you define an audience? Can you and feed them a message that compels them to come talk with you, right?
Right.
And what we're doing there is it is a little bit thinking about kind of like demand creation versus capture. I think people use that terminology. I don't love like necessarily all the framework stuff, but it's sort of like I don't want to be competing for like an existing thought of, let's say email sequencers. I don't want to be like, hey, you're a marketer, like, do you need a sequencer? Can we talk? Because they either already have one and they're not necessarily really thinking about it, and there's nothing like net new compelling about that, or they don't, but it's not really talking about like them, their world, their situational factors, right? And so what happens is if you kind of use messaging that's a little bit more tied to just like why do people say yes to buying from you, you
Mhm.
go hit the market with that. The only people that are going to be responsive are people in buying, like ready to be thinking about buying stuff, right? You're
Right.
kind of just like dangling it in front of them. It's like, hey, you want to bite? And it's like, okay, sure. And so it's inconsistent because a very small percentage of the market is ever buying. And so if you're kind of just like shotgunning the market and returning back sort of like the lay me down, like, yeah, yeah, sure, I guess I'll come talk to you stuff. I think that's what a lot of people experience with their outbound is it's basically like really bad. And so it only works in the most easy situations where it would literally work for almost anyone doing almost anything. And they think like that's what I have to go try to repeat over and over. And they don't realize they're literally chasing like the worst thing that's not actually going to get them where they want to be.
Fair enough. Makes a lot of sense. And this is ideally the reason why message market fit is kind of crucial, right? And what would be your recommendation in terms of how does someone define that? How does someone find the message market fit? And how does someone test it in different angles?
Yeah, good question. I think it's like a relativity concept. Like it's like this idea more than like a object that you'll hold and be like, I have it, right?
Right.
So to me, like the idea of message market fit, so the sort of framework I use to like break down the market and like run campaigns to sort of back into like what works the best
Got it.
is essentially like on a market level, what are the markets you serve, right? You look at that, then you segments of those markets. And the way I'm thinking about it is there's not like a right and a wrong segment, but there's ways to segment any given market that changes how we communicate to them, right? It kind of like changes like the problems that they're facing, the way they think about what success looks like, maybe the resources they have available for things. And
Mhm.
so to me, a lot of times people think of this like, even segmentation, like there's this right approach. To me,
Right.
there's infinite ways we can segment in literally infinite. And depending on how we do, it changes like the story we can tell the person that we're going to reach out to, right? So we want to map the markets out, and then we have like ideas of segments that we're kind of like, oh, this might sort of change the flavor of how I can phrase what we would do for it. And
Right.
to me, I'm always thinking of every other person who approaches this market. What do they average out? And how can I create granularity and segmentation within that so the people receiving my messages, it's really clear that it stands out like, oh, this guy knows that we are, like, I don't know, like a digital orthodontics office. And that like means some specific thing where if they always get the normal orthodontics like message, and this is this different thing, they'll be like, oh my God, I love you for it. And if I
True.
segment them out and then I go back to the regular ones and I
Mhm.
say, hey, I know you're orthodontics and you're not the digital one, as an example, it's the same sort of general message. But again, we're showing this like level of research and care and thoughtfulness that,
Right.
just really helps. So market level segments, then you have your personas, right? So
Mhm.
in each segment, right, not in the market, but in the
Right.
segment, we have like these ideas of personas. I like sort of like the framework of thinking of like who's the CEO of the problem, right? Like this segment, this business has to do something. Maybe it's the CEO is like owning marketing. Maybe it's marketing owns marketing. Maybe like operations, right? Like who knows? Maybe some sales dev rep, fractional people, right? And so
True.
it's not necessarily like, oh, the CMO in this market, but it might be like the person who owns marketing in this unique segment of this market everyone's familiar with, right? And so once you've mapped all of that stuff out, then we map out what I call angles, right? Some people call it value props. I like angle because I get to control it,
Right.
right? So like a value prop, there's kind of like this idea of an objective, like it's kind of static, but
Mhm.
an angle is like my flavoring on top of that, right? And it's sort of like there's directionality to it, and it's sort of an argument that I'm making at this person. And so to me, that's where you get to start getting into this like demand creation world where if you can sort of define their situation really, 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 really well, and then you're making actually stronger arguments than sort of like the average cold email going like, you know, like, would you like to talk? Or like, something really light. You can actually make really intelligent arguments, right? And so then the whole thing actually elevates this like high acumen, high intelligence, high reasoning message that's like very compelling to come talk to. So that's one node of messaging would be an angle to a persona in a segment of a market. And then what I do is basically map out all of those, run them against each other, and you just like test, validate, and walk away with like a relative best among each other.
Got it. This absolutely makes sense, right? Because one pointer which made a lot of sense to me is these people are receiving a lot of emails every day, right? And there are n number of people targeting, and it's just like another email. But if there needs to be something that's differentiating your email, this has to be there. Makes a lot of sense, Killen. And my follow up questions was regard to what you said right now. So based on any real world experiment, you've been doing this successfully for a long time. So do you have any framework you can give to our users? Because ideally, we had this conversation earlier. What we want is for users to test out something right after this call, something that they can take back to their workflow. So would you be having any real world example or experimentation framework for our users?
I would like the thing that like I quite, my clients all see market segment persona angle, and we live in 2 years, live and die by that. I
Right.
mean, day one, the very first client we ever signed, that's what we did. We've done it
Right.
every single time since, you know what I mean? And so to me, that's the framework. And how you balance that is it's sort because like the question, like if one of you is like a prospect right now, you'd be like, do we really need to run all of these? Right. And the answer is like, no, of course not. Because what we're doing is we want to map out all the possibilities.
Right.
And then like you, founder or whoever who knows your stuff really well, and me, guy who's done this a million times, we're gonna like relatively look at it. We're gonna prioritize. You're gonna run a number, maybe 5 of these at a time, let's say. And the way I look at it is like, so we typically might sell like a 4 month pilot, right? To get real tactical. 4 month pilot, 1 month setup, 3 months of sending. Maybe each month we're doing 5 of these at a time, right? So it
Right.
means over a pilot, we're going to do 15 of them. So I'll tell someone is like at the end of a pilot, you're not going to have the best results you'll ever have with us. You'll probably have the worst results you'll ever have with us. I expect we'll only be able to get better, but you'll have this like directionality, right? Because month one, we're going to take our best swing. Sometimes that goes great and that's like obviously amazing, but sometimes, you might go month one and get nothing. I'm
True.
not scared of that. And I'm going to sell them. I'm going to tell them like, if we get nothing, that's great because you and I will have looked at something and been like, we think this is going to be awesome. We run it. If we get nothing, you and I are learning a lot right there, right? Like that's going to be
True.
like a big wake up call. And it's not like you hired 3 reps, you went 6 months, you hired a fractional person, you fired all of them, and now you're figuring this out. It's like, no, we're going to go straight for the throat month one right away. We're going to start to figure things out. And each month after that, it's just competing against the last thing, right? And so you're kind of always asking, like, is there another thing I could do to improve this to sort of outcompete it? Slash, is there even a world where this kind of performs at a level that like a client needs to get to, right? Because sometimes you have stuff that's going to just never outperform like this sort of very mediocre thing. But it becomes a conversation with the client too. It's like a retention mechanism because you get to tell them like these campaigns aren't like how good is Kellen? Look at these campaigns. Oh, Kellen sucks. It's like no, these are like 10 out of 10 nodes of experimentation against a lot of possibility. And it's usually sort of this open thing like I have this pilot to earn earn enough results and enough trust to keep doing this, right? And it's sort of like with experimentation stuff, it's like the worse it's going, the more the answer is like you need to run more experiments. And a lot of times for me, I'm telling clients like this is what you should do whether or not I'm here. And
Right.
I totally understand if paying me like expedites how quickly we need to figure out if this works. And sometimes in discovery calls, I'm like, I'd rather you go 9 months doing this on your own than like only give me 2 months before you decide whether or not this works. Because what can work on 12 months is like most things, 9 months, a lot of things, 6 months, quite a few. But when you start to get to like 1, 2, it's like trickier. So that's how I look at it, man.
Got it. Thank you so much for that, Killen. And I had a question on the chat. So Frank was asking if this is like a messaging process, or if it's actually a framework if it's a process framework, or if it's a messaging framework. So I think at this point, it's actually a process framework, I believe, because messaging is also there, but it's also a process framework where you also segment, you find the market fit, and the follow-up process aligns up.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I don't even know. Like, I'm actually curious. Like, I don't know process. Like, are we saying like, is this the process of mapping it out versus how to communicate it? Is that kind of like what the question is?
It was basically, so when you said, you had this 4 steps where you like first segment the users and all the follow-ups. So Frank was asking if it's actually only for the messaging framework, or is it actually the process framework that you have? So for example, your outbound process framework, right? So you segment first and then you find the market fit and then the messaging, etc.
Yeah, it's I see it as like it's to me it's like one and the same. You know what I mean? Because it's basically like it's like it's almost like a flow chart you can follow. It's like a flow chart to infinity either way. Because
Right.
like sort of because it's going terribly, like it goes back to like reevaluate your segmentation rerun experiments. When it goes well, you do the same thing, right? So it's just perpetual. It's just always like re-looking at me like, can I outgun this?
Makes a lot of sense. Perfect. Just looking at the chat one more time to see if there are any questions regarding this. Nothing. Allah has been dropping some gold as well. Go for it, sir. Awesome. So the next topic I wanted to cover was building scalable systems, right? Because with most of the users we talk to, that's been one major pain point, Kellen. So based on your expertise, what would be your idea to build repeatable outbound machines without adding an SDR headcount? Because that's something teams with low bandwidth would need, right? Because they don't want to hire a specific person for this. They'd want to basically build a scalable system that does the job for them. So what would be your
Yeah,
take on that, Kellen?
you guys know the answer, man. That's why we're here. No, yeah, I mean, like, let's see, I just got a question too. I'll get back to that in a sec. Yeah, so to me when I think of the idea of like how to like build a scalable system, right? Like it always starts with the market. And one of the ways I think like a really helpful sort of lens is like the market exists without us, right? Again, like a lot of time, I'm the deal lab. I look at the market and I'm like, who is like the deal lab's market? And I think there's like this circle of people doesn't exist. Like I'm the new guy. You know what I mean? It's like these markets exist. They have ecosystems. They do stuff. They have ways they think about themselves. And so it's why, like to me, market segmentation is like the very first thing because it's sort of like, what the hell are we even doing? Like this. You know what I mean?
True.
Depending on how many, people or companies, depending on how you want to, if you're like doing two people at a time or whatever. But depending on how many like companies or contacts, I usually think of it as like you have the whole thing.
Mhm.
And then usually someone in the company, like even if it's just a founder, let's say you should do some amount of not just big scaled stuff, right? Let's say it's 1/100th of a percent of your market, two people a month. I don't care. But like you should take the top something and you should distribute it to whoever people around to go do the absolute best stuff. I mean? I can't scale this webinar, right? Like I spend the time to do this because it's really special and it's worth something. And so I think like a lot of times people think GTM in their first like scaled like one to many. And it's sort of like I don't think that's square one. I think square one is like how much bandwidth do you have to do like really, really, really elite, like less scalable stuff.
Mhm.
And it's going to be tiny. It's going to be a tiny piece of the market, right? So
Right.
once you have that peeled away, let's just say it's 1%, you have 99% rest. What I would basically do is consider the consumption rate you want across your TAM. So like most companies don't reach out to everyone in their TAM even once a year, right? If you don't reach out to someone, you have a 0% probability of like converting them on an outbound message, right? And so it's like most companies literally don't try to convert most of their TAM. They literally don't not once spend one effort. My lens would be like maybe once a quarter we should, right? So let's say top 10% goes to like a founder and the executives, and let's say they have two AEs, it goes to AEs. I would take the rest of that 90. I'd probably lop off the bottom third, right? Be
Right.
like, probably isn't super valuable. Now you have this middle 60. I basically do some sort of like scoring against it in
Mhm.
order to create like bands of 20% of the market.
Right.
And each quarter I would basically cycle through it. So I'd have kind of like cohort A, B, C. And month one, I'd hit cohort A, right? February B, March C. When I get back to April, I would hit up A and it would be like A minus converted leads, minus like do not contact, minus bounced. And you basically have these like three like broader curated lists that are distinctly not the things that you would one to one reach out to because a lot of, I come from like a like B2B SaaS, like I was a rep, and a lot of those people are like, oh my God, don't send all this emails. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I'm talking about the people you're ignoring. You know what I mean? Like the people you're not talking to.
True.
And so to me, distribute the top percent, take the rest of this stuff and create just some sort of cycling through it. And I would just kind of start there. Again, I would go back to like the segmentation framework. So maybe like cohort A is, one market and B is another. It just depends. I'm also like really big on get moving with like don't right now zero companies pretty much are like solving for like most companies are thinking about like what do I need in the next like month, 2 months, you know, which isn't necessarily like the most functional place to be, but it's reality. And I see a lot of companies who are like have, 45-day problems in they're considering like the 12-month implications of things. And I think sometimes that's not necessarily, it's kind of like who cares the scalable way of approaching the TAM if you need to get like viability in your next 90 days or you got to shut down.
True. True. And taking one step back might be a silly question, Kellen, but so you said you have the data ready. You have it split across your quarter. So ABC cohort A goes on Jan, cohort B on Feb, March, and the cycle repeats. You exclude people who've bounced, replied, not interested, etc. One thing I wanted to understand is, do you also revisit to see if there are any new leads or new prospects available? Because
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So that's 100%. I would have some sort of, usually like usually we're doing this in clay, right? Like for us, not everyone's going to do it that way. So like whatever, but you should. And so I usually sort of have like a table that is like I can dump anything into it. I built this for a lot of clients too. It's like you can dump anything into it, and all it's going to do is be like it can be a company name, it can be a domain, like it can be super scattered data. And it's basically going to like enrich the contact,
right,
check it against that like main database and go like, do we already have this? If yes, it just stops. If no, it like passes it in and it's like, all right, what are the segments this is involved in? What are the contacts personas that we can get? Like it does all of the thing. So I would see it as like you have one system that's like go find random net new things, dump it in, and that feeds it into like these like cohorts of people to be reached out to. Another system is like once a month you need to feed you probably need to like dedupe the cohort and then feed it back in, right? So you have like a couple of these processes that are probably not 100% automated, but you don't want it anyways because you need sort of like evaluation, like feedback loop stuff involved in it.
right.
Um, yeah.
Awesome. And the final part that I had was basically testing and learning fast, right? Because at this point, you have multiple angles, you're testing things out. And one common question that I'd like to ask is how to run high volume tests. Because at this point, we're crucially testing, right? We have multiple angles, we have multiple tests going out. How does someone run these high volume tests without actually killing deliverability? Do you have any recommendations for that?
Well, one thing I would just say it helps. Our agency, like we have not run into any like mega deliverability issues before and stuff, but we're not like specialized in that, right?
Right.
We send a little bit lower. Yeah, that's it. So high volume. Just to speak into this, so when I started the agency for the first year, we charged 5 grand a month and we reached out to 1,000 contacts a month
Oh,
across 5 segments. Just so you guys know, because I heard a lot of people are like, you can't do that, but it's like, no, no. So the experimentation stuff, people will pay for. Now, you don't retain people that well if you don't have like a higher, it's kind of like, because with 1,000 contacts, even if you're succeeding in one of those segments, you're not going to hit like high enough volumes that people. So, anyways, and then we have clients that we send like hundreds of thousands a month for. So it's like we have nice little spectrum. We're not in the millions. I would say yet. I don't know that we ever will be. Um. So, anyways, that was like Frank had like asked a question. Sorry, I lost. You had asked how. What was your question again? Sorry.
So it was about high volume tests. So considering I'm doing this,
Oh, right.
how do I not kill my deliverability?
Yeah. So the first thing is like the more end nodes, like experiment node, so let's say that you're sending like 50,000 a month. Most of, a lot of my friends that are doing that might have like 1 to 3 different like sequences they're sending, right? If we're sending 50,000, we might have like 10, right? And so if each one is like a different persona in a different segment of a different market, the argument, the structure of the email itself is completely different. Like it is not the same at all. And so we have literal it's almost like it's not spin we do spin tax too, and we use AI stuff, so it's like we do all the things to make sure we deliver and we send out a smart lead. Um, but yeah, so I would say like you just need to have the variability in it. You know what I mean? So it's like we send from a bunch of different infrastructure. We use scaled mail and organic outreach and some Google stuff direct and some of the stuff from Smartlead directly with you guys. Um, so it's like we have a bunch, I like to have multiple like infrastructure sort of sets for a client so that like a whole thing could go down and we have continuity with other stuff, right? Like redundancy is like a huge theme with me. And so it's like redundant infrastructure. You have lots of different nodes you're targeting with lots of different copy.
Right.
We don't like push the inboxes, right? We're not, and we manage, we do, I think, really well with like client relationship as well, meaning there's these pressures that exist where clients are like, I want this stuff right away. And we're sitting here, and it's like, the more I force this right now, like in the next, 72 hours, I can spike some stuff, but then maybe like day 5, I'm gonna like just, blow it all up, trying to go too hard with too much sending. And so for us, it's like we just have the conversation. We're running these experiments. Like I might tell a client, hey, if you really want me to, I can take like a few of these inboxes and I can crank these things. I just think that they're going to blow up really quickly, and like it's going to delay us later. But if that's what you want to pay for, and so I think more open, like honest communication, and not. I know I made some mistakes early on of like shielding too much of what I was bearing for clients, so that
Right.
they weren't necessarily feeling the value of it.
Mhm.
But yeah, I just think that like I would say that the number one thing is like use spin tax, send from like a healthy volume, just get a bunch more inboxes if you think you're running into issues. Um, and target well, like if you build your freaking list really well, like you're not gonna have a lot of issues.
Yep. Send safe emails and you're safe. Fair enough, Kellen. Thank you so much. And last question I had was, because most of us are new to this, right? Most of, probably some of us are starters. And one thing we want to understand is in terms of all these processes, right? So be it building data, for sending out emails, you have Smartlead, of course, but what would be a tool stack that you would recommend, Kellen? Right? Considering all of us are going to implement something right now, or some of us here might already be evaluating what we currently have. So, based on your experience, based on your success, what do you think would be the right tool stack, or what would be your recommendation on that?
Yeah, I would. Do you think it's gonna be? I'll answer both, but I'm just curious. Do you think it's gonna be more helpful for like the beginner tech stack version or like a really advanced version?
Mhm. Uh, let's say beginner and as well as advanced as well, because we have both a set of people right here. So,
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
that would
yeah.
be.
Todd says he's a noob. This one's for you, Todd. No, okay. So for me, like the noob tech stack, I would use Smartlead, right? And like Smartlead was like the very first thing we got, right? Clay wasn't like Smartlead to me is like the foundation. I'd use Smartlead. I would buy inboxes out of Smartlead directly. I would recommend getting multiple providers, right? I don't even care if it's like Google and Outlook versus, I would probably do some Google, some Outlook. You can do some SMTP servers, but I would have some variability in the provider out of Smartlead.
Right.
Um, I would do your validations from like I would do like everything native inside of Smartlead that you can. And then for data, I would use Clay. And I would get like the Clay account that's like 350 probably or 550, one of those two, which is
Right.
a little expensive. So if you can't nix Clay, maybe go to like Apollo, I guess. But actually go to ocean.io. They're doing some cool contact stuff. So Ocean. But anyway, so with Clay, I would basically like do contact searches. I would use Clagent with a GPT key, bring your own GPT key so you're not using credits. And I would do like big search for companies. I would append it with some qualitative data using Clagent. And then I would categorize it using Clagent, right? That segment stuff. And then I would pull the contacts off of those. And
Right.
then I would do a little bit of research.
Mhm.
Um, and I would just pipe and I wouldn't do any AI lines. I would just
Right.
do I'd do spintax copy.
Right.
So that's sitting in Smartlead, and I would just pipe from Clay into Smartlead and send from there. And that stack, you could build $1 million business off that 100%. Like as an agency, like you do not need anything else. I use so much other stuff, but like you definitely don't need it, let's see. So Todd, is that good? Does that okay, cool. Let me know if there's follow-up questions on the simple one. So on the complex one, what I would do is, or what we do, right? One is you're going to have more specialized like scrapers to get different end nodes. So instead of going like Clay company search, which is like one source of company data,
Mhm.
I might use that plus, we had a client recently that sold to forklift dealers, right? So we mapped like 35,000 zip codes in the United States. We used serper.dev. In each of those 35,000 zip codes, we got 10 results. So we had 350,000 like Google Maps end
Oh,
nodes.
okay.
And we like enriched and validated them down to like 1,800 that were like good fit companies. You know what I mean? But that list doesn't exist anywhere else. So it seems like really ridiculous. It's crazy resource intensive. It's really timely, like time consuming. But the list you walk away with is like, Ocean doesn't even have it, and they're the best one for like company search. Apollo definitely doesn't have like you can't get that somewhere else. So I think like the advanced tech stack is like sort of like specialized scrapers based on the job. You're using Apify and stuff. So, Apify, serper.dev. You're still pushing stuff into Clay. You probably have a lot more like contact search stuff. I'd use Lead Magic for sure. Prospeo is great, like some of those types of things. And then I would start to do more like AI, right? Octave would be one I would throw in there, by the way, both even for the simple one. So if you wanted to go further, like you guys should check out Octave. They're like they they've built like a product that kind of does some of the similar like thinking around like market segment persona angle.
Right.
Here it's like I'll throw it in the chat. Someone asked.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, let me go up and see if any of these questions. Let's see. What do you think of Listkit? Dude, Andre is dope. Listkit's cool. I haven't used their data a ton, but they're like super cool people and they all run businesses. And so like to me, it's always like a really high signal for me. It's like this person like runs a business using this thing and they sell the thing. So I would trust it. I would totally use it.
Absolutely.
Let's see. I'm using instantly. Dude, what do we gotta do to get you on Smartlead? Let's do it. Let me know.
It's actually
Uh,
a very native integration to answer Nadine's question, right? So it's a native integration. It's perfect. The kind of workflows you can pull off, the push and pull, bidirectional. We'll have a video on that as to how we can make use of it. So Nadine, if that would be helpful, I'll drop it to you on the chat.
this is fine. We have a bunch of people who want to do an onboarding. We'll do a group onboarding later. It's funny. Let's see. Okay, beginner question. Imagine you have a new setup and your mailboxes have been warmed up for 2 weeks. How many emails would you send per inbox on the first day going live, and how much would you ramp up? Yeah, that's a great question. One is like I warmed for a month. That's one thing that I know like I'm a little bit less aggressive to get started than some other people are. I don't, and again, I don't run into some issues that I think others do, but so I would warm longer if you could. Um, the like type of inbox you're sending from matters. To like most inbox vendors will sort of have like a best practice that they'll tell you that's like this is like this is really safe, like you can probably push it to here. And so I would start, if I was starting early and I'm like worried about preserving them, I would, maybe do like half the volume that you'll get to or less, and I would kind of ramp it up. But really, I would just, if you warm it the whole time, like a month, you can kind of like get pretty straight into it as well, in my experience. And I would just play around with it. Most of these things, like the answer to almost everything is like, there's not an explicit, concrete answer. I could give you what I think and it could still go wrong. And the best thing to do is to kind of be like, come up with your own framework of like, this is what I'm doing, do the thing, and then sort of like qualitatively measure, did it work? And like iterate off of that and figure out your system a little bit.
Thank you for that. We
Yeah.
have one from Rock as well, Kellen.
Yes. Really simply with the little target as possible. Yeah, yeah. For not hiring an agency to handle everything step by step. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So Rock, real quick in the chat, tell me like, are you asking like tool set or are you asking procedurally? If you could reply to your thing, that would be best because I think it'll pop up there. Yeah, a lot of octave love. Let's see. Um, see if Rock's throwing maximum. I'll hit this one while Rock replies. Whoa. Maximum number of emails.
And
The
Rock is
number of emails you can send is based on the inbox. So you want to think of like, depending on what inbox you're sending out of, that will dictate um, how much you can send. Did
and
Rocks?
responded, Kellen. So you said procedurally and tool set, ideal stack, and process.
Yes. Okay, cool. The first thing I would do is like grab like a whiteboard and I'd map out what are the markets you serve. And I would think of the markets as like, what does everyone else who like your competitors, who do they think they sell to? Right. And I'd put those down as like your top level nodes. Then I would say, how could I take the thing everyone thinks is like one thing, and how can I segment these into like 2 to 4 subgroups of that thing that meaningfully change how I can communicate to them? Right. So let's say you sell the software, and people might be like Series B SaaS, and it might totally change how we communicate if it's PLG versus sales led growth versus marketing led growth, as an example. Right. And so it's arbitrary. There's not a right and a wrong, but it's like market and then segment, then personas, like the contact titles, but I would sort of aggregate them by who owns the thing that you're influencing. So it could be, both CEO and CMO could be the same persona in a certain market or segment. So I'd map that out conceptually. Then I would have your angles, like the value prop arguments you're going to make to them. Then I would get Smartlead and I would get your inboxes out of there. I would send out of there. You're doing your warm up out of there. I would get data from like clay.com. I would search for those companies that your competitors are familiar with, basically. And then I'd use like Chat GPT in Clay to create segmentation of those companies. So you now have kind of a more proprietary account list. Pull the contacts off that proprietary account list, right? Now you have like the actual data that matches like that idea we had, right? Then you're going to write copy, right? So you're going to write copy for each of these, like this, this angle to this persona in the segment of this market. That will be a unique sequence inside of Smartlead. You'll send the people into the sequences that matches like that persona of that segment of that market. And then you'll want to spin tax the copy. You can Google what that is. It's like create variability. Um, and then you run it. And basically that will be a great campaign. And what you'll have at the end of that is you'll be like, whoa, the PLG group like never took a meeting with me, but like marketing led teams are like, hell yeah. You know what I mean? And so now you're like, okay, cool. We're going to start suppressing the PLG companies. I'm going to pull my next list based off marketing led growth. And now I might take marketing led growth companies and segment that further to get more specific because I'm like, oh, this is like this valuable node. And I'm always going to assume, because if you think of the spectrum as like one to everyone versus one to one, you can always get more granular to be more specific and more compelling.
I
Hopefully
get
that answered.
and I'm picking one more from the chat from Shillong. What's the ideal reply rate you would go for before you scale a campaign?
That's a great question. It's relative, right? So I had a client that was like, if we get one deal per 2 years from you, this is like a grand slam. And they're like, they were willing to go months and months and months with, like if they get a meeting in a month, they're like, hell yeah, dude. And so it's relative. And again, I think this is where agency practitioner space does actually a pretty poor job at being like good businesses because people kind of themselves become so desperate for like our idea of this arbitrary benchmark we need to run, and that's like not really aligning to like your customer and what their actual needs are and what their reality is, and so I don't think of it. I think it's more like all of these numbers are meant to sort of represent a business impact, and the more clearly you can be on like what is the business impact you're looking for and sort of like what are we doing together. um I think you can sort of, yeah, it doesn't exactly matter. We have some campaigns, as an example, they're like high reply rate, low reply rate. We've tried a million different things and we just can't make it more palatable. We can get their attention, we can get them to talk to us. We can't get higher agreeability. And we have some campaigns that are like present as quite bad reply rates. Like this kind of sucks. And it's super high positive reply rate. And we've been running it for months and it just works. You know, Another way of thinking about it is like when you map out all these segments and you have these end nodes like personas, you're going to have some personas that are really, really, really hard to reach and are way more valuable than everything else. Right. And so reply rate isn't like the thing we care about. It's actually like talking to the right people that drive the right conversation. So you might have like Fortune 500 CISO and you might almost never deliver. You might almost never get a reply. The replies you get might be mostly bad, but when you get a yes, it's like, oh my God, this is $5 million deal opportunity. You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean you shouldn't run it, but you might need to be mindful of like what percentage of your eggs, right, you're putting in the basket of this like super disagreeable cold email funnel. So to me, it's conversation with clients.
Right. And the next follow-up question was also from Ryan. So it was along the same lines, but he actually gave you the specifics of what they do, how their TAM looks like, etc. So if you'd want to look into that, it's right there, Kellen.
Nice. Let's uh let's see, where is it? Where is it?
Is right below this. So it's basically, again, what kind of response rates do you consider to be good uh, in 2025, trying to understand how the real world is working. And if it helps, he's a B2B SaaS around $200 per month. TAM is about 10K firms, mostly small. And I think our PMF and market message fit are both pretty good and getting better.
Can you send me, I'm not seeing like that comment. I'm trying to,
Let me tag you right there. Yeah.
no, I see it. No, I see it. Sorry. It's up there. Yeah. Okay. Um, for many years now, I was just curious. Helps B2B SaaS, $200 a month. It's hard for me to say the reply rate. Like I would just because I it- it's I don't generally like stylistically, I kind of like don't participate in like chasing an arbitrary number that way because to me it's like first of all, it's like a lot of my clients are like higher deal value than like $200 a month. And so it's a little bit outside of like my wheelhouse maybe, but like the TAM size is kind of like in a, you know, let me think about this. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I'm such a qualitative guy. Like I really go hard on the qualitative because to me, I'm always wondering, like looking at whatever you're running, I would be asking myself, like, does this seem representative of as good as this can get or not? And usually people have an idea of that. And if not, then I would just be doing different things. Like different is better, run some experiments and like, oh, this underperformed. What does that tell me? Oh, this beat this a little bit. What does that tell me? Or like, oh, this is completely inelastic. Like no matter how I change this, results never change. That's also interesting. And so and then to me, it's like, if I say like, oh, it's twice as much as you're doing today, like what's the job to be done? Go experiment. If I said, hey, what you're doing today is 3 times as good as what I think is reasonable, you should still go experiment. And so to me, it's just like, go keep doing the thing, keep kind of outgunning yourself. I don't know. Hopefully that's helpful, man.
Absolutely. And I'm going to bring two common questions that we always get, Kellen. So one is what kind of volume are you doing per mailbox? Right. So that's something that people would want to know because they want to be safe in terms of deliverability. And that's one question. And the next one is, do I do links or not? My recommendation would be no links. Everybody I've spoken to, including us, we don't do links that can hurt deliverability. But these are two common questions we always get. We have it on the chat as well. Your thoughts?
Yep. Yeah, great ones. So send volume, like what we're doing right now is when we're sending out of Outlook, we're sending 2 emails per day. When we're sending out of Google, we're sending 20 or 25. And when we're sending out of SMTP servers, I think we're sending like 35.
Right.
We use organic outreach, Joe Petruzzi, and like he has like best practices and stuff, and we just run with that. I tend to lean on two per day per Outlook. We use like scaled mail as one of our Outlook providers, and like, for anyone who's like, what the heck, how do you send 2 per inbox? Like the way he does it, it's like you'll have 4 domains. Each domain has 49 inboxes, and then we'll send 2 emails per inbox off of those.
Right.
It's just one of the like vendors who has ways that they're, approaching the Outlook stuff.
Right. And in terms of plain text and having tracking links, Kellen, your thoughts on that?
Yep. Yeah. So again, kind of like I've been saying, like deliverability isn't the goal, right? Like impacts the goal, right? I have a client, so I default no links. Like for me, the framework we use of like segmentation and stuff, like it approaches like just a really compelling logical text argument. And a big part of what I think is useful about that for like message market fit, when you're cold calling, you and I having a conversation, the transfer of like meaning, what you feel, a very, very small percentage of it is the logical word selection I'm using, right? There's like pathos, ethos, logos, right? Like logos is like the logic appeal, right? Pathos is the emotional appeal, and ethos is like the ethical or sort of appeal of character. And so in verbal communication like this, pathos and ethos are almost all of what you're feeling, right? Which means you basically are going like, hey, this guy's kind of fucking likable. Sorry if I'm hopefully I can swear. This guy's kind of likable. Whatever, sounds trustworthy. Like, yeah, I'll take the call, right? That's like a cold call accepted thing.
True.
When you send an email, you remove all of that. It is only logos. It is logic. It's just text. And so if you have a text wall that is like has this logical reasoning that compels people to come talk to you, that is way, way more valuable than having a Kellen who can go make a bunch of calls and convert someone because you can multiply the logical text argument to infinity. You cannot multiply people, right? And people provide false positives too, because I might have a less compelling argument. I make it work over the phone, and we're thinking like, oh, this is how we go, this is how we do it, this is how we do it, not realizing, yeah. So, anyways, I can't remember exactly. Oh, so going back to we send plain text almost always. Sometimes we have clients who have some sort of link or some sort of thing that they're interested in sending, and we'll just do it. We'll usually A/B test it. Great. And honestly, I think of like the three that come to mind. Two of them, the campaign that performed the best was the one with the links, 100%.
Right. Good. Thank you so much, Kellen. This is all I had from my end. One last question. I know we've been talking too much. We've been talking too much about the processes, etc. If we were to sum up in 5 lines, right? If you were to give our participants a quick recap of 5 things that they can take away from this session, how would you sum it up? If you can, please.
Yeah, totally. I would say like segment your market more granularly. I would say segment more granularly. I would say map out all of the potential or like many current known potential campaigns before running ones. So
Right.
don't just think like what's the one next thing I run, but like run campaigns in the context of a larger framework. So it's like segment better, um, map all the different campaigns out. I would say like, experimentation framework, like in general, right? Like we want to be aggressively in action and then assessing on the back end, not spinning our wheels, assessing things, not actually doing stuff. A lot of people live there. That use Smartlead, right? And then I don't know the fifth one. The fifth one, I think those are the four I'll go with.
These are the core ones, but fair
Yeah.
enough. This was super interesting, right? So apart from the common roads we always run, this was like a different approach that we all can take. It was, at least for me, right? So that's all I had. And we had a couple of questions on the chat, but the chat might get queued. So we have the session open for questions. So just we'll raise your hands. You have the React icon in the center. Click on that. You will see an option to raise your hand. Once you do that, turn on your video and I'll spotlight you. You can ask your questions directly to Kellen.
Let's do it.
There you go. Anybody? Yep. The man's here. There you go, sir.
Yo,
Can
yo.
you unmute yourself? Yep.
Yo, can you hear me?
All good, G.
Yeah.
How are you?
Okay, cool. All right, so that was really interesting. That was awesome. So here's a question that I have, and it's so how do you mentioned earlier in the conversation where you're talking about how sometimes people are misframed between believing that outbound will work the same as inbound or their existing process, right? And so in your case, how do you get that alignment? Is that something you qualify for whenever you're in the sales conversation? And if they just don't, you know, they're not about it, they're DQ'd, or is it something where you're able to coach and reframe them into the right perspective once they started?
Yeah. Good question. Like, talk to me a little bit. Like, I perceive it to be like there's a friction to this concept in like the sales process. So I want to hear a little
Yeah,
more
yeah.
specific on the nose about
Well,
like what are you anticipating?
yeah, okay. So let's say for instance we're in a sales conversation and they're talking about like, yeah, another point that you mentioned, like our average close rate is, let's say, like, 50%, but like it's all like inbound organic social. And so it's like, okay, like you can't necessarily take that close rate at face value and say like, all right, that's going to be your outbound close rate, right? Um, but sometimes clients say we're going to hop on with the assumption that it's going to be
Yeah.
50%, and then they don't hit that assumption,
Mhm.
right? And that can create disappointment, friction with the client, et cetera, later in the actual client engagement process. So the question is, do you reframe them? And at what point do you reframe them? Like help them change their understanding? Or is that something where, if they just don't understand, or if they haven't done outbound before to know that, they're DQ'd. Right? I
Yeah.
feel like the DQ might limit
That's a little gnarly.
who
That's
you
a little
even work
gnarly.
with. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
My lens is like, it's like great AEs, right, are like taught to be like disqualification centric, right? Like we don't want to waste our
Yeah.
time. That's true,
Uh-huh.
right? What I see honestly, especially honestly in like agencies, I think agency guys can sometimes accidentally be basically like jerks to prospects because they kind of
Yeah, yeah.
miss like what we're trying to do with this. To me,
Mm,
the solution's super easy, right? Is like you're the expert. This person needs you. You just described how
mm,
you have this lens that like, oh my God, they need that so badly in their business.
mm,
And so to me,
mm,
I throw it at them. I'm like so clear and transparent. And so I just be like, I'm super stoked that you're so excited and you're like already thinking about all the deals you guys want to close through this. I just need to call
mm,
out that like, and I would just tell them like, this is a completely new funnel. Like that's great. In that funnel, you have that thing. That's probably like,
mm,
it's not tied together, but like
mm.
the first, outbound call that you come in, you sit down and you try to like even set your agenda the same way. You're gonna learn very
Yeah,
quickly
yeah,
that it's not the same thing. You know what
yeah.
I mean? And so I would
Mm-hmm.
kind of tell them like, hey, my lens is you're probably not going to uphold the same close rate. If you really think you are, like, that's awesome. If you want to kind of like model off of that, that's super cool. And
Mm-hmm.
I would literally tell them like, my worry is I'm going to set you a moderate amount of meetings, like I would expect.
Hmm.
Everyone who has bought from me has heard some version of like you should say yes to this if you're super excited to go through this process and get to the end of it and know either like we
Hmm.
have some really asymmetrical winning campaigns that we could probably scale, or we have some stuff
Yeah.
that kind of works and we can keep on the
Hmm.
R&D motion, or we can just stop if what you need to understand is we have no guarantee which of those we're going to be until we've gone through this process together.
Yeah.
if you're if what you're hearing is like, man, I would hate it if this doesn't work well, but this Kellen guy really, really sounds like he knows what he's doing, and so I think he's
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
going to make it work. I go, don't give me your money because I sincerely, I like cannot promise above that, and I don't want to get to the situation where like 60 days in and you're all frustrated because
Yeah.
exactly what I'm
Yeah.
telling you right now is what's happening. You know what I mean? And so
Mm.
honestly, you do that, you're still going to end up in the spots where sometimes you have people who are like really wishful and hopeful, and you're not there, and you just got to be
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
but to me, like super honest, super transparent, super direct, kind of like almost
Hmm.
make it easy for them to self opt out, right? Like, hey, I'm not trying to drag you in. I'm giving you
Hmm.
every reason that you can say
Yeah.
no,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that if you get to a yes, like that's on us. We'll go make this stuff work or
Hmm.
whatever.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay. Cool. 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 Well, I'll be respectful. I know there are other people with other questions. I could ask more questions, but thank you so
Yeah,
much. That was great.
great to meet, dude. Hit me up anytime, by
Yeah.
the way. Any other questions?
Yeah,
Anyone?
dude, for sure.
Awesome. Next up is Mayura. If you can actually turn on your video, I'll spotlight you. If not, I can unmute you. I'll give it a few seconds. If you don't turn on your video, I'll actually unmute yourself. Yep, I'm going ahead. Can you unmute yourself, please? All right. I think Mayura is not here, but I think Susan had a couple of questions on chat, and Susan had her hand raised as well. Susan, do you still have?
Hello,
Yeah,
am
there
I
you.
audible?
Yep, you are.
Okay, I'm extremely sorry for some glitch. I'm not able to turn my video on.
No issues.
Just have a question that, some very often we put the soft CTA that, for example, can I send over a Loom video? So that, and the reply rate does go high when we use the softer CTA. My question is, how do you follow up after that? When people say, yes, send it, we send it over. And a lot of time we don't know whether they have watched it or not, or how do we follow up after that? What do you recommend is the good strategy to follow up after a soft CTA like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me think about this. Because I don't do tons of like Loom video stuff. It's tough, right? Because I think so sometimes like it's great, it's a fine CTA. I think sometimes we can, if you're reporting against like positive replies, sometimes people are like really trying to get people to say yes to taking a video. And if you're to kind of look at like what was the email, like what is the actual video, and then like what would the leap be to like come, enter into an opportunity, sometimes they're really far apart. And so like the first thing I'd be asking is just like, are we kind of like just trying to like hackily throw people out of video and hope that like forces them forward, right? Because no matter what, the video has to have some sort of reasoning that goes like, based on this, you should go do this. And then it's like, let's just go get that in the email, maybe. If they opt into the video, I think following up, like I would always default to questions. Like questions are engagement driving. So I'd be like, like, hey, name, want to make sure you got the video. Like, do you mind me asking? And then like maybe something like about what they're doing related to something in the video. I would make sure it's really far away from sounding, you don't want to be like, if I was Smartlead, I wouldn't be like, hey, by the way, are you already sending emails at scale? Like, I wouldn't do that because that's so obviously just trying to pull them into like, let me pitch at you. So I might say something like, hey, let's say that you decide email is a terrible channel for you. Like, what are some of the other things you guys are considering? Right? That's very like welcoming to come answer into because it will feel more like they're creating distance when really they're actually just like arming me with information.
Got it. Mayura, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good luck. Good luck.
Awesome. Any other questions? If yes, please raise your hands. Chat is being answered too. But if you guys have any questions, this is your time. You can raise your hands and I'll spotlight you. Susan, I hope all your questions are answered. I didn't see the chat, but if you have any, please raise your hand. I'll spotlight you. Frank has one more. There you go.
Let me real quick, still answer. Someone asked about best CTA to get them to schedule a call. to me, it's connected back to like the argument you're making, right? So I might be like, like, let me think about this. Like if I was like, hey, Nam, like I saw that your company recently lost your VP of marketing. I look back at some of your sales team's like previous LinkedIn posts, and it seems like you guys closed a lot of deals off of inbounds. Um, we help companies like lower acquisition costs by running cold email systems that outperform like paid ad spend. And then so then my CTA might be like, would you be open to me showing you what building a campaign together could look like? Right. And so the thing they're saying yes to is not like, do I maybe want to buy this? It's not like we're not even really that focused on like our services, like the productization of what we sell. But it's like you have this situation. Would learning this thing basically be useful? Because that's something they'll definitely will like they will learn things on the call. And so I think getting to the point where they feel like the thing they want to learn on the call is the valuable thing is like a really good place to be. Got you, Will. All right, Frank, hit us.
Well, my question was similar to that. So it's like, okay, you talked about building value prop, right? And so you just kind of walk through like a, framework of how you kind of might structure an email. So could you dive in just a little bit more into value prop and how you think about like what are the principles behind creating a great, CTA or value proposition inside of an email that someone would go, yeah, this sounds like a great idea.
This is gonna be so boring. No, it goes back to the model because it's like, okay, market, segment, persona, angle, right? And so my
Yeah.
angle might be like founders who own the marketing function would rather outsource something to someone like me than think about what to do else. Right? Like that
Mm,
might be like my angle. And so it's like that's the so the so then I might go to the campaign. And again, like the way it's so to break it down, it's like people who lost their, market might be like Series B Series B companies or Series A, let's say Series A is probably more realistic. Series A
mhm,
companies. And then the segment is like ones without a CMO or like a marketing
mhm.
leader, but used to have one, right?
Yeah.
Then the persona is the person who owns marketing, right?
Mhm,
That's interesting because now it's like, wait, a company with no marketing, who owns marketing, right? So it might be head of sales,
mhm,
might be, maybe it's CFO, I don't know, right?
mhm.
So now we have this, and then like, what is our hypothesis? What's this angle? Like our angle is like you have this, but it's not really actually your job, and you don't want it to be your job, and so
Yeah,
you would
yeah, yeah.
love a transactional way to like hand this off to someone,
Mhm,
right? And so then, and then I might be thinking like, okay, if I were to bring that argument, we all do this basically, right? If I were to bring this argument, what are they going to say? They're going to say like, I've heard it doesn't, all of the objections
yeah.
we've heard. So then when I go construct my messaging, a lot, so much of what I'm doing is trying to be like, I want this person to feel like I understand them better than everyone else. This is actually great. Framework I didn't talk about my world versus their world, your world, right? So
Mhm,
a lot of cold email feels like I grab you by your collar and I'm like pulling you into me to try
yeah,
to
yeah.
communicate. If I did that, you're
Mhm,
yanking away. You're like, I hate you for that.
mhm,
We want to do things that it's almost like we're kind of underspoken. We're dropping alpha in a way that you lean in like you kind of are right now to hear it, right?
mhm,
Like I want it. And so it's like I need to speak to your world so you're interested in me. If I try to
mhm,
cast out my thing at you, you're going to push it away. And so
mhm.
we want to be like, I understand you so much that my message is just like articulating this idea in a way that you kind of want them like nodding, reading along, like, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the CTA, it's like it's subtle. It doesn't have that big of a lift because it's like all of the stuff sort of quote unquote beforehand. Right. Sometimes I actually open with my
Mm,
CTA too. So like if the CTA is really good, sometimes like, hey, name, can I blank? I saw you recently lost
yeah,
your head of
yeah.
marketing. You guys don't have anyone else, and I'm sure you don't want to be owning it. We've done stuff like this. Let me know if you'd like to talk. You know what I mean? Something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. That's great. It's you mentioned like a little cues, like are they nodding to themselves as they're reading the email? Are they agreeing as it and so by the time you get to the CTA, it's you're not even really necessarily focused on writing a banger CTA because
Exactly.
you know that you've they're already framed and positioned to say yes no matter what you say at the end.
Yeah,
That's
it's like good
great,
discovery,
dude. That's
right? Think
awesome.
of like if you're doing great discovery, you're like, hey man, great to show up,
Mm.
like blah blah blah. And maybe and you basically start asking questions, right? And you're like, tell me what brings you here. And then they say something. And you know how like you'll be like, here's the agenda, and then you'll ask some sort of like underhand, like, what brings you here? And they'll give you a little blurb, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
anyone's pretty good at discovery, right? You ever ask that question next and you just like mic dropped it, like
Yeah.
one question after that, and they're like, oh, and they're like, man, like I haven't been, and you just know, you're like, man, like eight of my competitors just lost an op. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah.
they're in. To me, that's like the good email. And what happens is when you run discovery that way, right? When you ask these great questions, they very
Mm,
eagerly get to this point of like, wait, what do you do? Like, how can you help me? Because holy shit, you understand me so well. Right. And so it's
mm,
like, we just want to do that in this super condensed form where by the time we're getting to the CTA, it's almost like it's cherry on top. You know, it's not doing too
yeah.
much because this person's already like, holy smokes, like this person really understands it. They're doing this, they're doing this. Like, this is really impressive. All of this sort of stuff.
Mm.
So yeah, anyways, that's my lens.
Cool, cool, cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, totally. Let's see. Daniel had a question about some tracking stuff. Let me go see if we can hit this. Saying Clay, I signed a bunch of granular fields, job title, sub-industry, but I'm not using those fields in my email copy. Dude, that's a good question, Daniel. Totally depends on how. So Daniel's question is like, you're sending in smart leads, so you have like campaign analytics, but so you have campaigns, and then in Clay you have like tags, categorization, personas, and stuff like that. And so it's kind of like, do we want to push those into smart lead so we have it in our smart lead data? Do we want to, what do we do with that? I think it depends where you want to. One thing is if like for us, a campaign is like one angle to one persona and one segment of one market. So we use campaign naming to carry that like metadata of like market segment persona angle. Um, and we use like Notion as our like that's like our third thing would be like this Notion where it's sort of like you can have connections between Clay and Notion databases, and then Smartlead stuff can push to that, and then you can like link them. And yeah, so hopefully that answers. But I think just wherever you're most fluent with analytics is probably fine.
Awesome. And if Will has a question still, we'll probably make that the last question for the day. Will, if you can unmute, sir, we can shoot your question to Kellen. I did see a comment saying it was already answered, but if you have anything else, go for it, Will. Awesome.
Dang,
Perfect.
don't say what's up.
Well,
Get
then
it.
it's Ashish, right? So we have the last question for the day from Ashish. Ashish, if you can turn on your video, I'll spotlight you. If not, I can unmute you, mate. Yep.
Hey guys, you can see me, right?
Yep.
Yeah, what's up, dude?
Begin clear, sir.
Hi, Kellen. Hi, Akash. So, you answered a question about, two Outlook mailboxes. And 1 minute, you said two from Outlook, 20 from Gmail, 30 to 35, 30 to 35 from SMTP. And, after that, I was just reading the comments of the people. And, I got confused. So if you could break it down one last time, that'd be great.
Yeah. So the thing I'll say is like, to me, so it's like I look at things like someone in your business, someone in your org chart, so to speak, is like the deliverability expert, right? It's not me and mine. Like it's my vendors, right? Like the partners that I work with, like I totally like rely on. Like we do our own, testing, and but it's not like we're just brainless to it, but like the because I wouldn't say like, let's say that I get Google inboxes from vendor A and you get them from vendor C. I wouldn't just like ignore what you've been doing because my vendor A does it this way or whatever, right? And so we use like Scaled Mail is the vendor that we're using for Outlook. What they do is you will if you had 4 domains, each of those domains will have 49 inboxes. So one domain you're and we'll send two off of. So you're basically getting like 100 emails per domain, right? Which is like not crazy different than some of the other metrics. It's just distributed in kind of like a different way. So two for Outlook for us, 20 or 25 from Google. We used to do like 30, and we've just lowered it just out of like precaution, basically, based on what we're hearing boots on the ground from other folks. And then the SMTP server vendor that we're using right now, Organic Outreach, we send, I believe, 35 out of, but it's like his ecosystem, and he does like replacements if there's issues and stuff. And so what I would mostly recommend is just people get like sort of like have someone that's sort of like your partner that you really trust, that you're sort of, the other thing is like Jesse Olet, like everyone knows him, like Jesse Olet is like he's who sort of like big brothered me, he helped me get into this stuff where like for the first, I mean, still to this day, it's like he's like a very primary sort of resource in a lot of ways for some of these things. He runs a group called SAS Yacht Club, I think is like an open invite thing, or like a paid link or whatever. But like I would find like communities of people that you can sort of like have ongoing stuff as well. Because what I do today isn't necessarily what I think I'll be doing 3 months from now, 6 months from now. I don't know. You know what I mean? And so it's more important to kind of keep up with like the iteration cycles than it is to like do the right thing, I guess.
Thanks, Kellen, for breaking it down. Thanks, Akash.
Yeah.
Thank you,
You bet.
Ashish. But these are all the questions we had. One from Eunice was, which SMTP provider are you using, Kellen? If you can call that out.
For SMTP?
Yep.
Yeah, we just said Smartlead Organic Outreach in here. Those are the ones I would use. Yeah, organic outreach is like you buy it in like 50,000 cent capacity, like in like chunks. So just depending on your use case, like I would probably for most people, I would just do all smart stuff. That would be my recommendation.
Love it. Love it. Awesome. Why only 2 in Outlook? While we wind it up, there are questions that are coming, but I swear this is the last question.
Outlook's me. Yeah, I don't know, because they block us if we send a third, allegedly.
Absolutely. What I had in my mind as well, because no specific reasons to it, just to be safe, perhaps.
Yeah.
But awesome. This is all I had from my end, Kellen, and this is all the questions I had as well. So anything else from your end, sir, before we wrap it up?
No, dude, this is just super fun. I really appreciate the questions. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you guys. This is so fun. So anyone who has questions like ongoing, LinkedIn's probably the best place to hit me up. Like, feel free to drop me stuff there. I run a group called Clay Cafe that's like on my LinkedIn. There's like a thing. We have a Slack community. Like, that's also probably a cool place to hang out if you're kind of like doing this type of stuff. Tell all your friends about Smartlead. Do me a favor and go promote Smartlead.
Thank you for that, and love it. This was super helpful, Kellen. Like, honestly, for me, this was like a new perspective from, as I said, the usual road we run. But thank you so much for this. And people who are here, we have the Smartlead Expert program we're offering for all our custom plan 90 and above users. So if you're a custom 90K or an above user, and if you're having problems with infrastructure, deliverability, or if you'd want someone to audit your accounts, hit me up, or you can reach out to me on Slack, or you can drop me an email as well, and we'll set up a call for you with one of our experts. But Kellen, thank you so much. This was an OG session, like Swapnil mentioned. And 3 consistent things in life, people: taxes, death, and office hours every weekend, every Thursday. I'll see you guys in the next one. Ciao. Bye-bye.
Let's go. Be well, dude. Peace. See everybody.